We finally made it to the end of this cardiovascular and lymphatic system journey, and we're going to talk about the immune system now. So the immune system is what protects us against foreign invaders. There's bacteria, fungi, viruses, all of these things in the outside world that we do not want inside our body. We want our body to be as sterile as possible. So we have to have some type of system that protects us against these things. We also don't want potentially dangerous cells like cancerous cells moving around our body, and the immune system helps us against those as well. So the harmful invaders are called pathogens. These are just disease-causing organisms. Now your immune system is split up into two different divisions: the innate immunity, or the non-specific immune system, or the adaptive and specific immune system. We're going to start from the outside and work our way in and get more and more specific, starting with the innate immune response. This is innate, it's natural, it's inborn. We have these just from the fact that we're human. And these include things like our skin, our mucous membranes, our inflammation response, all of these different activities. Now, the first line of defense is the skin and the mucous membranes. This is just the physical barrier against invading microbes. If I have a wall around, my house or my castle, enemy forces aren't going to be able to get in as if there weren't a wall there, or there was not a wall there. Now, the thing about the skin that makes it particularly advantageous as a barrier is that it is almost specifically designed to fight off bacteria. The skin secretes different things like sweat and sebum that actually lowers the pH of the top of your skin itself. It brings the pH down to about 3 to 5, which is highly acidic, and most pathogenic species, diseases or bacteria, viruses that cause disease, they can't survive at that low pH. Our mucous membranes also secrete mucus. It's a really thick, sticky material that acts as a physical trap for the pathogens. They fall into the mucus, they can't get out, and then our body can swallow that and digest up all of the bacteria in that mucus. We also secrete an enzyme called lysozyme, and this is found mostly in our tears and our saliva, a little bit in our digestive system, and this is an enzyme that's specifically made to kill bacteria. We also have other types of defenses with our skin, like our normal flora. We have bacteria lining our entire surface of our skin and actually throughout our digestive tract, because that part is open to the rest of the world. And we end up colonizing good bacteria. And these bacteria help fight off the bad bacteria or viruses that could come in. We've kind of created a symbiotic relationship with these organisms where we give them a place where they're constantly getting nutrients and safety, and they protect us from foreign invaders. There's also mechanical first lines of defense, like our ciliary elevator. Inside your respiratory tract, we want the air to be as sterile as possible. We don't want any infections inside our lungs, or that's going to inhibit our ability to breathe. So we have these cells lining our respiratory tract that have these cilia, or little hairs on them. And they will beat and actually move mucus and material up this ciliary elevator out of our respiratory tract into our mouth, and then we can swallow that mucus and digest it and get rid of all the bacteria. We also have nose hairs that help trap bacteria and other types of physical barriers like that. The second line of defense is still part of our innate immune system. It's something that we're born with, inherent as humans. And these include a bunch of different cells and chemicals that protect our body should our first line of defense fail, like you have a cut in your skin or something like that. So the first one of these lines of defense is going to be the natural killer cells. And these are cells that are found all throughout your blood, all throughout your lymph, and they're just on patrol at all times, looking for cells that aren't functioning normally. So they're not looking for bacteria and viruses. They're looking for cells that have been infected already by a bacteria or a virus, where the virus may be living inside that cell and copying itself. So these are cells that help us recognize when it's already too late for some of our cells. Now these cells, natural killer cells, will go around, find these particular infected cells, and secrete an enzyme or a protein called perforin. These will poke holes in the cell membrane of the cell that's a problem, the infected cell. And this causes water to rush into the cell, and the cell essentially bursts. Now, NK cells can also do this for cancer cells. They go around our entire immune system, or our entire body, our blood and our lymph, looking for cancer cells to kill in the same way. We then have inflammation, and the whole point of having inflammation is to prevent the spread of pathogens, and it helps repair our cells. We want to fix whatever is potentially causing the problem. So usually inflammation is triggered when the body's cells are damaged. When that happens, the damaged cells will release histamine and kinins, and these will cause the blood vessels to dilate. It'll cause them to get bigger. That brings more blood to the area. More blood means more oxygen, which means faster healing. But it also means we're bringing more white blood cells to the area. And when our blood vessels dilate, it becomes a lot easier for the white blood cells to sneak out of the blood vessels through that diapedesis motion. They will then leave the blood and go into the surrounding tissue and attack whatever possible microbes are getting into our body where they aren't supposed to be. Now, the 4 signs of inflammation are redness, swelling, heat, and pain. The redness and the heat comes from that blood vessel dilation. As we bring more blood to the surface of our skin, it'll appear like our skin is redder, and our blood is very warm, so our skin gets very warm to the touch. And like I said, when we dilate our blood vessels, they're more leaky, so you end up having a lot of fluid leaving the blood vessels and getting into that area of damage, which causes swelling. And that extra fluid actually puts pressure on our other cells and our nerve receptors, so we end up feeling pain as a result. Often with inflammation, you'll see pus, and that's because of all the accumulation of the white blood cells. White blood cells, when you get a lot of them together, literally look white. So the more you have fighting off an infection, you might see that pus start to develop. Then there's phagocytes. These are special cells that move around our body, not just in the blood and the lymph. They can leave and go into the tissues themselves, and they're looking for bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, anything like that to eat. So they will go around consuming these cells and debris. And the way they do that is by kind of surrounding whatever they want to eat with their cell membrane. So they push out their cell membrane around the bacteria that they're trying to eat, and it ends up enveloping it and taking it in what's called a phagosome. And then we fuse it with a special cell organelle called a lysosome. These are like little stomachs of the cell. They contain digestive enzymes. And when those two fuse together, the digestive enzymes in the lysosome end up digesting away the bacteria, and then the cell can release the bacteria as waste after they've digested them down. We also have complement as part of our innate immune system. And these are just proteins that are circulating around in our blood plasma. And when they find a foreign invader, they will bind to them. And when that happens, it activates them. An activated complement causes an inflammatory response to occur. It causes more phagocytes to come to the area, so that way we're eating up all of those bad cells that have gotten into our body. And it also can make it easier for a phagocyte to actually consume what it needs to consume. We also can form these membrane attack complexes with our complement proteins, and basically will form holes in our invading cells, causing water to rush in, which makes the cell burst. We also have interferon, and these are specifically designed to help us fight off viral infections. So if a cell has been infected by a virus, it's going to know that something's wrong most of the time, and it's going to start secreting or releasing a protein called interferon. And this interferon is meant as a warning signal. It's sending out the message to all the other neighboring cells saying, hey, I've got a virus in me, you guys need to protect yourselves. So these warned cells can do whatever they need to do, like release proteins to break down the virus. They can protect the cell itself. They do all these different things to protect themselves from being invaded by these viruses. And the last one is fever. So our body has a set temperature. We have a thermostat in our body, and we like to keep our temperature around 98.6 degrees. That's where all of our cells and our enzymes work at their optimal point. But when we have an infection, there's these chemicals that are made by white blood cells called pyrogens that actually force the body's thermostat to get a little bit warmer than normal. So instead of 98.6, it'll say, go a little bit higher. This high temperature does a few things. First, it's going to make all of your cellular processes work a little bit faster. Enzymes tend to work better when they have slightly higher temperatures. Not too high or they're destroyed, but just a little bit higher makes them work faster. So this will promote healing. The higher temperatures also affect the liver. The liver ends up taking up all the extra iron and zinc that's around our body and storing it inside the liver where bacteria and viruses can't get to it. Iron and zinc are not that common out in nature in a way that cells can use. So bacteria like to attack humans and other organisms because we are using all this iron and zinc, and we've already converted it into a form that's easy for the body and a cell to use. So bacteria come into our cells looking for this iron and zinc, and if it's not around, they're going to die because they need it to survive. And now we get into the second division of the immune system, the specific or adaptive immune response. Sometimes this is considered the third line of defense. This is the part of your immune system that remembers. So the reason why vaccines work, we can expose our body to a little bit of a disease, a virus, and then our body will remember and be able to fight it off better in the future. And it's all because of these two specific cells, B cells and T cells. And there's three key aspects to this whole division of our immune response. It's specific, it affects the whole body, and it can remember past infections. It has a memory. So this is where we have a targeted assault on one particular invading microbe. It's not a generalized response like our skin is or complement. This is a very specific attack on like the coronavirus that's come into your body, or like the flu, something like that. Then we have humoral immunity as part of that response. This is our antibody-mediated immunity. So we've often heard that our body makes antibodies to fight off infections. Well, these are small proteins that are actually shaped like a Y, just like this. And they go around and they can stick to proteins called antigens that are on the surface of cells. Every single cell has these antigen proteins on top of it. Even your cells do. But we can produce antibodies that recognize foreign antigens and essentially use that to eliminate the threat of this foreign invader and recognize who is invading our body. So antibodies are produced by B cells, and let's look how that's done. The B cells will initially bind to an antigen, and that's going to trigger them to start something called clonal selection. They're going to clone themselves after they get activated. They copy themselves a lot. And some of their copies become these plasma cells. And plasma cells are the ones that are going to actively make antibodies. So they will make antibodies based off of what activated the original B cell. Whatever antigen that B cell bonded with is now going to be creating antibodies against that particular antigen. But then some of the copies of the B cell are going to become memory B cells. And these are ones that are going to stay in your body so that if we ever get infected with this particular antigen or virus again, we can respond to it much faster in the future. We also have cellular immunity that's done by T cells. So we have cytotoxic T cells, helper T cells, and memory T cells. And their job is essentially to perform targeted attacks on cells that are already infected, kind of like those natural killer cells. A phagocyte will go around and eat up bacteria and viruses, whereas a natural killer cell is looking for a human cell that's been infected by a virus. Our T cells are going to do something very similar. They're looking for cells that have been infected, and they're going to cause an immune response with them. Our cytotoxic T cells, they're going to target those cells that are infected by viruses or cancer cells or cells that don't belong in our body, such as if we have a blood transfusion and we get the wrong type of blood, or you have an organ transplant. This is now somebody else's cells in your body, and your body is going to want to defend against that. That's why when you often have organ transplants, you have to take anti-rejection medications that prevent your immune system from fighting off the new organ that you receive. Now, cytotoxic T cells, the word cyto means cell, and toxic sounds exactly like what it is. So these are cells that are toxic to other cells. They're going to bind to infected cells, and they're going to create perforin, which is going to actually poke little holes in that cell and cause that cell to be destroyed. So it's a way of finding our cells that are already too far gone and getting rid of the infection, so that way whatever virus is inside of them isn't going to keep replicating and infecting new cells. Our helper T cells do exactly that. They're going to help the immune system. So when it's time for us to respond to an infection, these are the ones that essentially make our immune response stronger and more directed. So they can trigger B cells to start producing antibodies. They can call more immune cells to the area. They can also release chemicals called cytokines. And these are just chemicals that enhance the immune response. They're going to stimulate more B cells and T cells to grow and divide and start working. They're going to make it easier for macrophages to find and consume invaders. But sometimes we have this particular reaction called a cytokine storm, where your body ends up producing a lot of cytokines, probably way more than it needed to. And it's essentially an immune system that has a twitchy eye or a twitchy trigger finger, and it's going to get set off and just go crazy. And when a cytokine storm happens, it triggers so much inflammation in your body that you actually start having organ failure. So they believe that with the 1918 flu, one of the reasons why it killed adults that were in their prime, who normally can fight off infections very well, is because it triggered a cytokine storm in individuals who were fairly healthy, and they ended up attacking their own bodies and dying as a result. Now, with our T cells, we can't not talk about HIV and AIDS. HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, and it actually will infect helper T cells. So this is the HIV virus there, and this is a T cell. The HIV virus actually injects itself into the T cell, and its DNA gets incorporated into our DNA. And our DNA then is hijacked to create more baby viruses. Well, when the baby viruses need to leave the cell, they can often cause the cell to malfunction or get destroyed. So over time, our T cells stop working properly. And if our helper T cells aren't working properly, then we can't activate cytotoxic T cells, we can't activate B cells, so our entire immune system is crippled. And when it reaches the point where you have such a high infection that your immune system is essentially completely shut down, you develop AIDS, autoimmune deficiency syndrome. And there are treatments for AIDS and HIV, however, there's no cures. There's a lot of doctors working on this right now, trying to cure HIV/AIDS. There's actually been in the news that 2 people have been cured of it, but it's a very new treatment. It's still in trials. So it's definitely a hot area of research because it's a very fatal disease. When you get it, it shuts down your immune system, so any type of minor infection can end up becoming one that takes your life. And the last thing we're going to talk about relating to the immune system are these autoimmune disorders. So your body spends a lot of time and effort learning what belongs to yourself and what belongs to a foreign invader. Remember, every single cell has an antigen on it, even your own. So our body has to learn that our antigens are okay. We don't want to attack them. Well, sometimes that doesn't go the way we plan, and your body will actually recognize your own antigens as bad actors, and it's time for us to destroy them. So your immune system turns against its own cells. And this can cause a lot of different syndromes depending on what types of cells are being targeted. An example of an autoimmune disorder is type 1 diabetes. If we target those specific cells that deal with our insulin, you can end up with problems regulating insulin and your blood sugar in your body. So sometimes we find that these autoimmune disorders come in waves, and they can actually be triggered or cause a flare-up if you're under a lot of stress. Sometimes if you're already immunocompromised, like you're sick, your immune system will then go into hyperdrive and start attacking yourself. So with autoimmune disorders, you guys are actually going to be researching them as part of your final project for this unit, and you're going to be discussing one particular autoimmune disorder and how it affects the body. If you have any questions, just let me know.